Welcome to our study of Romans. We're in week number 33. We're going to be looking at Romans chapter 10, verses 14 through 21 today. Just a quick recap. We're in the third section of Romans, meaning that we're in the section where Paul is talking about how Israel fits in to God's plan for salvation, how they fit in now, right? Well, the first section, chapters 1 through 4, is about God's righteousness, his faithfulness to his covenant and to his people and to his promises. 5 through 8 we're about the rescue plan, about how through Israel the law brought life through Jesus as the true Israelite, and so on and so on. Again, go back and watch all these if this is your first time here with us. But it's all of this ties together. No section of Romans is just kind of like, oh, it's my own thing. The closest we get to that is this section, verses chapters 9 through 11, where we're talking about how Israel kind of fits in, because Paul kind of takes a break from explaining things. Remember, his audience is both Gentile and Jewish, how they have to wrestle with this idea of Christianity, because there was a section right after the church was founded in Rome that all of the Jewish people were cast out of Rome by the emperor. So like the Jewish question of how does the church and the synagogue work together, live together, interact with each other, that becomes a big issue within this church specifically. And it only becomes a wider and bigger issue as time progresses, as the temple-focused Israel tries to separate itself from the Jesus-focused Christianity. Even though they both kind of share that same lineage, they both for a long time viewed themselves as Israel, and things continue to start to diverge. And so chapter 9 through chapter 10 verse 4 was kind of the progress thus far. Right? Paul again recaps, kind of like going all the way back to Abraham, how the plan along was for God to work through Israel to be a blessing to the whole world. Chapter 5, he starts talking about how Israel fits in and how God's going to interact with them and rescue them, and so that's kind of what we're talking about now. That God is working towards them, he's working for them, he's positioning himself towards them. And Paul, that's what he's wanting to do. So that's our line of thought right now. So we're going to be reading verses 14 through 21. So how are they to call on someone when they haven't believed in him? Them being Israel and him being Jesus. And how are they to believe if they don't hear? And how will they hear without someone announcing it to them? And how will people make that announcement unless they are sent? As the Bible says, how beautiful are the feet of the ones who bring good news of good things. But not all obeyed the good news. Isaiah asks, you see, Lord, who has believed our report? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing comes from the word of the Messiah. This might make us ask, did they not hear? But they certainly did. Their sound went out into all the world, and their words to the ends of the earth. But I ask, did Israel not know? To begin with, Moses says, I will make you jealous with a non-nation, and stir you to anger with a foolish people. Then Isaiah, greatly daring, puts it like this: I was found by someone who were not looking for me. By those who were not looking for me. I became visible to those who were not asking for me. In respect of Israel, he says, all day long I have stretched out my hands to a disbelieving and disagreeable people. See, we have to make sure we understand the Jewish expectation. We talked about this in the last video. That they had that Deuteronomy 28-29 expectation of, hey, if you break the covenant, if you don't keep the covenant God made with the people, then there will be consequences. But if you keep it, there will be blessings, right? But then in chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, it says, like, you're going to break it, and there's going to be consequences, but God's not going to abandon you. He's going to restore you. He's going to make you new. He's going to make a new heart. He's going to do something greater. And so the Jewish people had this expectation that coupled with the Messiah prophecies elsewhere, that the Messiah would do a new thing and make Israel great. Like, this is something we talk about all the time at church, that there was this Jewish expectation, especially in the first century, of the Messiah showing up and leading Israel in this great political, military, economic, worldly, powerfully way to put them on top of the world, and everybody else would essentially be their slaves. That was kind of the way that they expected. In a sense, they were kind of right. God had made them promises that he would usher in this age where his son would make things right. He would save his people. He would deal with evil. Like, all this was said in the Bible, but Israel kind of has this tendency, or at least did, to take what God had told them and twist it, either to suit their own understandings because they had a lack of understanding, or to suit what suited them, right? Like that was kind of what we saw. That's what Paul, like, this isn't my speculation. Like, that's what the New Testament and the gospel accounts are full of these stories of Israel missing the mark. See, up until now, Paul has kind of explained the gospel in this section, the invitation to the Gentiles, the fulfillment of the law through Jesus, how Israel was crucial, their failures included, to making all of this happen, to make salvation available to all. Now, if you were a Jewish reader in Paul's day, and you had this expectation, and maybe you accepted Christ, and you heard all this, you'd probably have some pushback, right? Because what Paul is saying is what you probably were taught from the moment you were born. Like, you were full-blown, like you had to memorize this stuff. It was like there was no gray areas. Like, everything that you were taught is essentially you misunderstood it. Like, people don't take that lying down. So that's what Paul is doing here. This is what actually happened. This is what it was. This is how it actually was meant to play out. You know, in your heart, as this Jewish person, you would have said, no, this is not what I was taught. No, this is not what I expected. This is not what you thought the way Jesus as the Messiah worked. Like, there was pushback here. And so Paul is kind of spelling it out. And that's what the rest of this section is. He's taking his reader back through the Bible to say, hey, this was the plan. And so the first thing he asks is did they know? Right? Maybe Israel didn't understand. Maybe they didn't know, right? So he starts by quoting Isaiah 52:7. He says, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. See, this section is from the build-up to the suffering servant, which is about Christ, you know, that he willingly gave himself up, that he willingly suffered to take on the sins of the world, to rescue the world. I mean, it's the gospel, essentially, just it's foretold. It's way before it actually happened. But this is the buildup. This is the buildup of that being announced. And it says that this is the good news. Like, it's kind of gross, right? Like, if feet are gross, let's just objectively say feet are nasty, right? But it's like when somebody brings you something that's such good news that even the nasty feet they walk on seem beautiful, right? And that's what Paul is saying. Like, listen, like, the only way that Israel is going to hear, that anybody's going to hear, is when somebody brings it to them. And the news of Jesus is the best news, right? And then he quotes Isaiah 12:38. He says, so that the word spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Lord, who has believed what he heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Basically, it's saying that just because everybody hears it doesn't mean they're going to listen to it, right? It's like you go out in the street and you tape a $20 bill to hundreds of flyers, right? And you walk down in the street of some city where everybody's walking around, where people normally pass out flyers, and you start trying to get people to take it. You don't show them the $20 bill. You just say, hey, would you like a flyer? Would you like a flyer? Would you like a flyer? And like most people will say no, right? A few will take it. But many will say no, not realizing, hey, it's just $20. Like, hey, here's just free money. Like, there's nothing else on it. It's just $20 taped to a piece of paper. See, we live in a world, and the world has always been like this, where everybody's got a message, everybody's got a flyer, everybody's got something they're trying to sell, and a lot of the times it's best to just ignore it. And so we build up this resistance to hearing new things. And what Paul is saying here is that the gospel, it needs to be shared over and over and over and over. Romans 10:17, in this section, it tells us that we have to keep sharing that good news, because the good news is how God works. That God takes the gospel, the gospel message, when it is shared, and he works through it. It's not that you convince somebody of the gospel. Yes, there is a mental element. Yes, you have to decide. Yes, but God works through it. When somebody accepts the gospel, when they accept Jesus, God works through that. And so we have to be non-discretionary, and we have to be determined to keep sharing the gospel. Paul continues on. He quotes Psalm 19:4, the first part of it. He says, their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. See, here Paul is answering the question of, well, maybe they didn't hear it, right? Like, if somebody mumbles something to you, well, you didn't hear that. They made the noise, but like, you didn't understand it. This ain't a way you could hear it. But here Paul is tying back to his argument in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 and 20, where he talks about how creation itself declares the glory of God. It draws people to seek him, to find him, to pursue him. And Israel, having the law and the prophets themselves, yeah, they knew. I mean, you got to remember our subject matter here, right? That Paul is not discussing like why some tribe in the middle of an island in the middle of the ocean never hears God. What happened? Like he's talking about Israel. Israel knew. The gospel has gone to the ends of the earth, is what Paul is saying, and Israel was at the center of it. You know? And Paul is using this argument by quoting these the same way he did at the end of chapter 8 by referencing the three parts of the Jewish Bible. They divided up their Bible amongst the writings, amongst the prophets, and amongst the law. And so he's quoted from the prophets, he's quoted from the writings. Now he's going to go back to the law, specifically Deuteronomy, which ties us back to what we talked about last week. Chapter 32, verse 21. He said, this is God speaking, he said, "They made me jealous with what is no God. They have provoked me to anger with their idols, so I will make them jealous with those who are no people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation." See, God made them promises all along. And Deuteronomy was the heartbeat of Israel, like the law. It's part of it. It spells out the law, right? It is Deuteronomy is where we find out it's Moses' great speech. The people knew it, right? And so by quoting here, he's saying like, no, like at length, they knew. They knew this was the plan, that God would use a foolish people. And foolish meaning they didn't have the wisdom of God. Not that they were dumb, but they lacked the wisdom of God because they didn't have the prophets. They didn't have the law. They didn't have the writings. They didn't have what the people of Israel had. And because the people of Israel had it, and yet they turned to false gods, to no gods, God said in Deuteronomy 32:21 that he would use no nation, foolish nation, to make them jealous. And this is why Jesus, when he flips tables and cracks whips at the temple in the gospel stories, like he calls them a den of thieves, a den of brigands. Not because he's mad that they're ripping people off at the money changing table, but because the people are robbing the rest of the world of the blessings that God had promised them all along. Go all the way back to Abraham. That the promise was that through Abraham, Abraham's offspring would be a blessing to the whole world. Israel took those blessings, took the law, took the prophets, took the writings, and said they're ours. Nobody else allowed to have them. Robbing the world of the blessings that God had made for them. And so when God, through his son, as true Israel, delivered on those promises, delivered on that blessing to the whole world, the response by the people of Israel who were trying to bogart all of it was jealousy. By turning their back, by walking away. And the result was twofold. And that's how Paul ends this section. He says in Isaiah 61:5, he quotes it, he says, "I was ready to be sought by those who did not ask for me. I was ready to be found by those who did not seek me. I said, here I am, to a nation that was not called by my name." The first result was people who lacked the wisdom, who did not know the things of God, did not know how to think through the lens of God, did not understand right thinking, understood correctly, applied appropriately as a mean to let God work out his will in their lives. They didn't have that. They weren't looking for God. Remember at the beginning of this letter of Romans that Paul had to explain what Judgment Day was. That there is a God who is going to hold evil account, and that the good will be he had to explain the basics because the Gentiles, they weren't looking for God. They don't have this base of knowledge that the Israelites did. And yet, they're the ones who are clinging to God in massive numbers. The church very quickly became Gentile focused. As a matter of fact, it caused problems in the 2nd century with anti-Semitism. But the point is that the first result of Israel being like this was that a nation that wasn't looking for God, the people, the Gentiles who weren't looking for God, found him. And the second result of this, he quotes the next verse in Isaiah 65. He says, "I spread out my hands on all day to a rebellious people who walk in a way that is not good, following their own devices." This is Israel he's talking about. The second result is the people who were desperately looking for God missed him. Not only did they miss him, they rejected him when he did finally show up. And so we see in today's section that we have to share the gospel. We have to continually do it. We're going to get rejected. That people who are supposedly close to God will reject it. And this applies to the Christian world today, that you see lots of people who are supposedly trying to follow the example of Jesus, trying to be like Jesus, do what Jesus did, being hateful and cruel and mean and angry and wrathful and sinful and all. Like, all of us sin, but there's so many people who claim to be close to God who are so far away. They reject living out what Christ commanded. And yet people who are so far from God, and I've seen it over and over again, I've been that person, who find God and they find life. And so it's our job as Christians to share that gospel, to share it, to trust that God will work through it. Hopefully this helps you understand this section. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, see you next time.